Let's welcome our guest this morning. Um, Welcome, Sarah. I've known Sarah for a pretty long time because she was a member of my church in Iona in Lebanon, and I knew her parents real well. And when I last saw her, she was a lot younger than what she is now. She's a young lady now, but I think you were maybe what, 12, 13, something,
Probably.
something like
Just
that.
reverse those numbers in a couple days. I'm about to be 21.
Oh wow, yeah, look at that. Yes. So anyway, we are so glad and happy to have you here this morning. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself and what you're doing
Yeah.
and before we
Well,
get into your experience.
first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. I am a junior nursing major. I go to school at a place called Widener. It's right outside of Philadelphia. And I enjoy it a lot. I played field hockey for quite a while. I was also a gymnast for many years. Um, I'm pretty involved. I'm in a sorority. I'm in my school's nursing organization. Um, yeah, I just, as he said before, like I've known him, pretty much forever. um, and so it was kind of ironic how we got back in touch with each other. I was sitting in a parking lot bored and I found a CD from Iona Church and I was listening to it and I thought to reach out. And, now here I am and being able to tell my story. It's just very exciting. So I'm so glad to be able to be here.
So Sarah, you're a nursing student and you're a junior, so you already have some education under your belt. Are you working right now also in the hospital setting?
So I don't work in a hospital setting, but I do work in healthcare. I work in like I'm a patient care tech in more of a group home. It's not like a nursing home. It's like a home with like four, like literally four patients, and it's just those four, and they have cognitive and physical ailments, and they require 24-hour care, and so we that's what I do.
Very cool. So
Thank
you have
you.
that practical side to your education, which is really
Yeah, and
cool.
thankfully, even with COVID, we were still able to do classes like our clinical in the hospital, so I was still able to get hospital experience.
So you growing up with a Jewish mother and a Roman Catholic father, and ending up in a Protestant church. We talked about this before, and we produced this little introduction video that some of us have seen here. But I know that it wasn't always easy for you, um, and that sometimes you felt that was a curse rather than a blessing. Can you share a
Yeah.
little bit more about your experiences?
Yeah. Well, definitely at first, for a long time, not only did I feel out of place just because I didn't necessarily know one specific religion as well as everyone else might have, I also was just personally confused because I was surrounded by so many different, ideologies. And, like we would go to my grandparents' house for Hanukkah and celebrate, and they would be reading these scriptures, and I had no idea what half of it meant. And then we're celebrating Christmas and, stuff from the Catholic side of my dad's family. And then, going to a Methodist church and doing that. And like, that's kind of the Methodist side is what to me seemed the most regular, I think. But it was definitely very confusing in my own head to be like, where do I belong? What is my religion? I know a lot of people would often be like, oh, like, what are you doing on Sunday? I'd be like, oh, I'm going to church. And they'd be like, oh, like, what are you? Like, and I'd be like, I couldn't tell you, like, and it definitely proposed a lot of complications in relationships, like with friends, just because everyone, had their goal of getting confirmed or, those type of things. And I was someone who was just kind of being bounced around from so many different religions that I didn't really find it easy for me to settle all my time into one and learn about it in depth. So I often felt like when I would go to Sunday school that, I felt out of place, or when, people would ask me like, "Oh, well, what about your religion is different from mine?" And I was like, I really don't know, So I think for a long time I felt like, I was uneducated and that because of that I didn't belong. And, people then also made me feel like, oh, if you don't know enough about your religion, then, you don't belong to part of that religion. But as I grew older, I realized that it's not all just about the rules and regulations of religion. It's also about the relationship that you have with God. And I've learned more as I've gotten older and kind of found my way, but definitely realized that for a long time I was very confused, would mix up things all the time, had no idea what to tell people what I was or my beliefs. Because I honestly just had no idea what they were because I felt like I had to believe in everything.
That's interesting. So, wow. So maybe because you felt excluded, I would imagine, oftentimes, then you felt like you had to believe all of it in order to maybe somehow fit in, right?
Yeah, we definitely didn't put as much emphasis on the Jewish side of my family because though my mom was raised Jewish, she wasn't raised like super strict about it. So when I was introduced to it, it wasn't anything that was super strict. So that was definitely like something that we participated in, but it wasn't to the level of someone who would be considering themselves fully Jewish, where they do all of their practices. And so for me, it was definitely one of those things where I felt like, okay, I have to, participate in this somehow because it's still part of my mom's history and it's my grandparents' side. But then I also had my dad's side, and we would participate in that. And like I said, because of especially the area that I was from, and as being Christian was kind of what everyone was in that area. So to be Jewish it was not something that many people were in that area. So for me, it was also like I felt like I had to push myself to be more on that side. But then I realized that I just didn't know much about it because then my parents decided to find a middle ground with going to Methodist church. And then that just brought it in a whole nother level.
So that's really super interesting. So you sort of felt pressured living in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, to espouse Christianity rather than your Jewish roots, and yet that was a big part of your life as well. Um, did you feel that pressure also, maybe from especially maybe your Jewish grandparents? Did they like try to instill, their beliefs into you as well?
Surprisingly, no. They they didn't really push religion on me. Actually, no one in my family really pushed religion on me until after you had like left the church and we decided that the church wasn't, what it used to be. And when we were trying to find a new one, then my mom kept wanting to push me to go somewhere and like find a new place to go because we had kind of had lost our traditions. Like at that point, my grandparents had passed away, so we didn't go see them anymore to do our Hanukkah traditions. So I think like my mom kind of felt lost in her area as well. So it was actually my mom who kind of would push it on me at first. And I finally had to sit her down and say, listen, I have no idea where I belong yet. I don't know what my beliefs are. So it's hard for me to go to all these different churches and figure out where I belong when all I've known is like three different religions being combined into one household. So it's actually, funny because you do think it's more of the elders who are a lot more strict, and that tends to be what you see. But my grandparents never really, they just kind of went with the flow.
What is it actually? I mean, you said that you're not sure about all that you believe, even maybe today. But what are some things that you do believe? Having been exposed to different sides of religions, what is it that you do firmly believe in?
I just believe that everyone is created equal should be treated equally. I believe that there is a heaven, that there is a God, and, miracles, all that type of stuff. I am someone who believes in like the aspect of the history with, Jesus and how all of that came to be. I think where I kind of get caught up is more of the specifics, how certain communities are like, we believe, all of this except XYZ and except this and that. And, like there's some people who don't accept like the LGBTQ community, or there's people who don't believe that, like premarital, um, like sex or having children is okay. And, some of the stuff that I feel like as we've moved forward with time doesn't reflect well with where we are as like my generation. And that's where I think it's more hard for me to like establish myself in one religion, because there are the people who do strictly follow some of those things, and you're frowned upon if you don't follow some of those more strict rules. And I think that's where I kind of find myself a little more challenged and tend to just, if I were to say, like, I say I'm a spiritual Christian, that's kind of where I go and tell people if I had to label myself.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of us here in our church at UMIV see things very similarly. We're not heavily into doctrine and theology. We believe spirituality is really where it's at. That's the most important thing. And so yeah, you're among friends here. You can share openly for sure. So one question I want to ask you is if you could go back in time and talk to your own self as a child when you were, struggling and very confused about things, what would you tell yourself? What would you tell your younger version?
I would tell my younger self that it's okay to not know where you belong yet. You don't want to rush yourself into anything, but also to not be afraid to put yourself out where you feel uncomfortable. I think if I would have put myself in positions that maybe weren't the most like in my comfort zone in Bible school, or those types of things, I might have been a lot more inclined to find my place quicker. Um, I definitely think also I would have told myself that, it's okay to branch off from what your parents also believe. You don't have to necessarily believe in what they believe, but you can respect what they believe. I think that was a big thing, is that I felt like I had to believe what they believed. And as I've gotten older, I realized not everyone has the same beliefs, but you can respect other people's beliefs.
I really like that. Thank you for saying that. So you don't have to
Yeah.
believe like other people, but you should respect what they believe. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's like the big thing that I've taken away from like, having such a combination of so many different religious ideologies and practices, is that it, there are going to be things that you come across, whether it's in your own personal experience or what someone else shares, that you might not agree with, but everyone has their own personal beliefs for a reason, whether it's they've had positive experiences with those beliefs, or something else. And it's the same reason why you believe in what you believe. And so I just really think that that's something that came out of this that was really good, that I don't really see anyone's religion necessarily as something totally odd. Like, it may not be something I quite understand, but I can respect why they might do that, or why those beliefs are what they have set in their foundation.
It seems to me, like listening to you, that because you were excluded, you felt excluded at times, you have come to a place where you're super inclusive, where you're, just with what you just shared too, that you would never exclude anybody from God or from, the fellowship of believers. Is that true? Is that perception right?
Yeah, definitely. I've come across people of all different types of beliefs. And, I've even had some friends who are like, I just, I haven't had any experience. I really don't believe in anything. And, I've understood where it's like, if you haven't had necessarily the correct experiences, or, maybe your experiences have varied from mine, that it's totally acceptable to have different belief systems. And it definitely has made me a lot more inclusive of people and their beliefs. Like, I would never shame someone for their beliefs if they vary from mine. I actually enjoy having discussions with people who have different beliefs, because I like seeing their views versus mine and understanding why they believe in what they believe. I think it also helps open up my eyes and makes me more well-rounded.
So, growing up with a Jewish mother and a Roman Catholic father, both of those traditions are known to produce a lot of guilt. Catholic guilt, Jewish guilt. Do you feel a lot of guilt?
When I was younger, I did. As I've gotten older, I definitely became a lot more independent as a person. Um, when I was younger, though, there definitely was the guilt of, each different religion and the belief system, like you just said. But as I got older, I definitely, like, I had the conversation with my parents and said, listen, this is just not who I am. And it doesn't mean I won't participate, doesn't mean that I don't respect, but I just know that this is not me. And I don't want to have this impact my life. And, they were very accepting of it. My mom, for a while, she was like, I had no idea that you felt this way. And, she was very open about it. But it just took me a while to get to that point to be able to say, for myself, that this is where I need to be to figure out who I am, and surrounding myself with the guilt from other religions and whatnot when it's not what I necessarily fully believe in is not fair to myself.
So, people like yourself who eh, have overcome the feelings of guilt and inadequacy, whatever it is, um, also have a very strong belief in forgiveness, that God forgives us in God's grace and in God's unconditional love for us. Do you feel those in your life?
Yeah, I do 100%. I'm actually a very big believer in forgiveness. And I'm someone who, when I feel overwhelmed or guilty, even if it's not something in a religious aspect, that I will, ask for forgiveness. That's something that definitely is big in my life. I've actually never, like, my parents made the decision when I was born to not baptize me because they didn't know at first what religion route and everything they were going to go with. And as I've gotten older, that's something that I've always, like, talked to my mom about, saying, like, I would love to be baptized eventually, and, also, like, have that clean slate and whatnot. So it's definitely something that I take big on. And I always, like, talk to my friends about, like, forgiveness and whatnot. I'm big on forgiving people. Like, I don't really hold those grudges and whatnot either. So
I would have thought that about you. Just a little bit, I know you. Just the way you come across. Now, one last thing I want to ask you. This is something we struggle with in our church personally, is the concept of hell. Now, I think it's fair to say that at the very least, we struggle with this concept, but I think most of us here in the church actually don't believe that there is such a thing as hell. And I personally struggle with it too. What do you believe about hell?
I don't really believe that there is a legitimate hell. I can't imagine that there's, like, people would be sent there in their afterlife. I think that maybe people's afterlife would not be as, I don't want to say enjoyable, but as relieving as some others, when they pass on to the afterlife, if they aren't in the right mindset. But I don't believe that there's necessarily a hell where it's like you get sent to heaven or hell. Um, I think that people kind of have more so turned that into, especially with more of the young population, turn that more into, like, an idea that, you know, you do something bad and that's where you're going to go. And I think it's more of you do something, and like if you, you know, when your time comes, then in your afterlife, that's like when you work on seeking your forgiveness. And so I think it's not necessarily like a you pass on and then you're punished. I think it's you pass and then you work on your forgiveness versus someone who might pass and have already succeeded on all of their forgiveness versus someone who passes and then is working on their forgiveness.
Wow, that's very well put. I like that.
Thank you.
Very, thank you so much.